You've got questions, we've got answers. We have the man to answer them. Jeffrey Levine from Buckingham Wealth Partners. Jeffrey, welcome back to the holiday edition of Ask the Hammer.
Happy holidays, sir. It's good to be with you.
Good to have you here. And it's good because we are just days after Senator Manchin declared that he would not support the Build Back Better legislation. And what to make of it? Is this coal in President Biden's stocking, or is it coal in our stockings, or is this a good gift?
Well, I think it probably depends upon who you ask and which political party you support for the most part. But that said, I think there's a little bit of coal and a little bit of gift in the entire bill. And so, unfortunately, we have to take the good with the bad. We have no choice over what's happening here. But look, certainly there's absolutely some coal here. One piece of coal would be the child tax credit, which is one of the more expensive provisions of the bill. And notably, that's why it was only going to be kept around, even in this bill, for one more year. That was anticipated this year, having that enhanced child tax credit. The estimate is that was reducing child poverty by about half, by nearly 50%. And whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, you're fiscally conservative or fiscally liberal, I think we can all agree that no child should go hungry. So, you know, our plea would be, look, if this doesn't happen, there'll be more kids next year that need help. Visit your local food bank and turn that coal back into a gift for someone else, right? That is no other way to look at it other than every child should eat. Now, as far as gifts from this law, well, you know, if you're a high income taxpayer, you're probably pretty happy about this because you're not seeing those additional surtaxes next year. If you are someone who opposes state and local taxes being deductible, probably means you're from a state with low state and local taxes. You're probably happy about this because you might see that as a gift to high income tax states that is now no longer happening. If you're an S corporation owner, this is a huge gift to you if you're a high income S corporation owner, because Build Back Better was going to assess the 3.8% surtax on investment income to high income S corporation owners. And Bob, I don't know if you can hear it in the background, but I think that's my snowblower blowing in the background. You know, there's always, we're still work from home. You never know what's going on. I believe the snowblower is outside moving all this snow around us. So apologies for that background noise.
All right, so I've got a couple questions. One is in voting or saying that he would vote against the bill or not back the bill, Senator Manchin described the cost involved and the effect on inflation. But we in the media accepted at his word that this would cause inflation. Any thoughts about the validity of that claim?
Well, it's interesting because he cites a number of studies analyzing the bill, and yet in some of those studies, some of the own studies that, you know, the very studies that he cites have actually shown that inflation would not be increased by this bill. So once again, if you want a study that shows inflation is going to increase, we could find one for you. If you wanted a study that shows inflation will not increase, we can find one for you. Even nonpartisan groups tend to have a little bit of a partisan slant from time to time. Look, ultimately, it's unclear. What we know is this. We know that inflation exists right now. We also know that the cost of inflation is not solely driven by spending. There are other factors that drive inflation. And when it comes to the debt, which is also being cited here, it's not just spending that drives debt and deficits. It's low revenue, right? Like any business, if you look at the federal government as a business, which it's not, but if you look at the federal government as a business that has, you know, revenues coming in and expenses coming out, well, lowering your revenue can, you know, hurt your bottom line, and increasing your expenses can hurt your bottom line. It's a two-part process. We did lower taxes, just a few years ago. That dramatically increased the deficit by about $2 trillion or so. Again, depends upon which study you look at. It's fair to say at some point enough is enough. The question is this the right time, and are these the right things to be saying no to? Once again, that's a much of a political argument, but regardless of which side you sit on, I think there's some coal and some present in this bill passing, as well as this bill not passing for just about everyone.
So two more questions. One is when Senator Manchin was describing his reluctance to support the bill, he talked about the nature of laws sunsetting and becoming instead of temporary, permanent. That's a bit of a gamble, right? With respect to all legislation that has sunset provisions in them.
Yeah, effectively, what Senator Manchin was saying is this is disingenuous. We're only, let's say, extending this child tax credit for 1 year when we really want it to be around for a long time, and that would cost more money. But you can do that with just about anything. I mean, again, let's look back at the Tax Cut and Jobs Act of a few years ago. Those provisions on the corporate side were permanent, but they are not on the individual side, right? Your tax cuts, my tax cuts, they expire in 2025 if nothing changes going into 2026. And it's not because Republicans were happy to limit the applicability of those changes they put into effect, but rather they had to, within budget constraints, they said, well, if we limit it to this number of years, the impact on our budget is only X dollars, right? So both parties, when it comes to reconciliation bills, that is the type of revenue bill that can be driven through by a simple majority vote, both parties played these games. Look, it's why for years we had so-called extenders to the law, right? Where things would come for a year or two, then they would like magically disappear, but Congress would always bring them back. They'd always bring them back. And the reason that happened was because if you only have it on the books for a year or two, the budget office can only look at the cost for those years in which it is actually enacted. You might know, quote unquote, that Congress is bringing it back. Congress might know it's bringing it back. But if we only put it on the books for a year or two, it only shows up on the books for a year or two. It's kind of a disingenuous way of going about things, but it's how Congress, not just Democrats, not just Republicans, but it's how Congress operates because they only look at the 10-year budget window.
Right. So I want you to take out your snow globe and make a prediction about what comes next, whether it's the build back a little bit better or build back not at all legislation. I've read and talked to experts that suggest that maybe this results in the Democrats proposing a much more narrow agenda, but maybe a more permanent solution to some of the.
So it's a really good question. I don't think anybody really knows for sure. These are all our best guesses at this point. I do think they will try. I mean, I think they're going to hold Manchin's feet to the fire. That is Democrats. This was something that the only reason we got our infrastructure bill passed earlier this year was because the progressive end of the Democrats Party, the Progressive Congressional Caucus, firmly believed that this was going to go through. The fact that it's not, they are a little bit stung. And there is a question here as to if you scale this back too much more, and this is already half the price of what the original bill was, right? The original bill was 4 trillion, cut it back to about 2 trillion. How much more can you trim and still keep those progressives on board when they have already been, at least in their thoughts, been burned by Manchin once? Very unclear. I think ultimately the most likely outcome is the Build Back Modestly Better Act, right? I think they settle on something is better than nothing. Manchin can say, well, I saved us a lot of money and it was going to be this much higher. Progressives say, we don't want this, but something is better than nothing. And they probably end up doing something. But it's difficult to predict. Once again, coming into this year, what made it so challenging was Democrats have a majority, but it's of the slimmest amount. And so you need literally all 50 senators to vote for it. And the House is no cakewalk either. There's only a handful of senators that can vote against their reconciliation bill, and rather a handful of representatives that can vote. Just 5, right? Handful, literally a handful, dooms it in the House as well. A little bit of a history lesson for our viewers. Back when then President Clinton passed tax legislation in the 90s, there was a reconciliation bill at that time. It raised tax rates at that time. Well, 6 senators actually voted against that who were Democrats at the time. So 6 Democrats voted against it, and more than 40 Democratic members in the House voted against that bill. It passed. It ultimately went to Vice President Gore to cast the deciding tie-breaking vote. But it was even then, it was of a slim margin, right? The vice president still had to cast the deciding vote. when they had plenty, if you will, of votes to lose. Here, they don't have anywhere near that sort of margin. And so ultimately handicapping what will happen becomes much, much less precise, because any one person in the Senate, maybe Bernie Sanders says, I'm not voting for it unless it does this on the other side. Like, you can't get rid of the child tax credit, otherwise I don't vote for it. Well, now we're back to build back, not at all.
Yeah.
So I know I will be paying close attention, Bob. I know you will be paying close attention, and I'm sure many of our viewers too. And if you've got questions about what's in there, what's not, what changes are coming, you just want to send Bob and I a nice note. We love hearing from you. Send us a message, reach out to us here at askthehammer@buckinghamgroup.com. Again, that's askthehammer@buckinghamgroup.com. We look forward to your questions. And on behalf of Bob and myself, we want to wish you and your families, your loved ones and friends, a very happy, healthy holiday season and all the best for a successful 2022.